today to talk about the city's small business support program. Hillary, if you want to go ahead and record, I see you're doing it. I'm Nick Ortiz, I'm the CEO of the Bakersfield Chamber, and I'm joined today by Chris Hewitt, Assistant City Manager for the City of Bakersfield, Randy McKeegan, who's the Finance Director for the City of Bakersfield, Joe Conroy, who is the Public Information Officer for the City of Bakersfield, and then Hillary Haynes, our Vice President of Member Engagement at the Chamber. So those of you joining us, thanks for joining us, and I'm sure you're interested in the city's small business support programs, but as I said, we're going to be recording this session and really would encourage you to invite or get this out to your networks so that as many small businesses as possible can be helped by this program. So I've got a range of questions and things that we'll run through really quickly. And then if there are any questions, feel free to pop it in the chat or the Q&A, and we'll get to it at the end. But my first question to Chris, if you could just, the city's small business support program, BCARES, is part of the city's overall allocation of CARES dollars. Can you talk generally about what the city's doing with its allocation of federal dollars to address COVID, and then specifically this program that's directed more at small businesses?
Yeah, thank you, Nick. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak to your membership. Thanks to you and Hillary and to the Chamber for allowing us to do that. As you mentioned, the city received upwards of $34 million through the state of CARES Act funding. It is actually federal funding, but the city did not receive any directly from the feds. Ours came from the state of California, and that was in July. In August, the City Council approved the framework of a plan that essentially allocated the $33.5 million into different buckets, so to speak. And I'm pleased to tell this group that over 50%, closer to 60% of that funding was allocated to different programs outside of kind of the city itself, outside of our organization, meaning that funding is going to small business assistance, like we'll talk a little bit about today, to nonprofit assistance, to things like rental and mortgage assistance for those that have been impacted by COVID, and to some public-private partnerships to, again, help out our local businesses, our local nonprofits, individuals within our community that have been impacted by COVID. So with that, one of the programs that we did set up is our BCARES Small Business Grant Program. And the council allocated about $3 million to this program, and it was really an outcome of discussions that we have had with small businesses in the community, really that we're looking for ways to gain easy access to funding. They've been impacted by COVID, of course, with the different restrictions and guidelines coming down from the state and other areas. And so really what we heard was, hey, we need to find a way to get money to those that really didn't have a chance for whatever reason to get federal PPP funding or funding through the Kern Recovers Forgivable loan program. And so Randy and his team quickly put together a program that was meant to get money out, funding out quickly to different small businesses within the community. And so I know Randy will walk through kind of the technical details of that, but that's really the background. And really at the end of the day, the council was really interested in seeing this money being infused into the local economy. We understand that small businesses are really the lifeblood of our community. And we understand the relationship between, ensuring a healthy, vibrant local economy and being able to have resources at the city to essentially provide those basic services that we all rely on, whether it's police, fire, streets, parks. So there's certainly that nexus here, and we wanted to make sure that we were doing everything we could, and the council was wanting to make sure they were doing everything they could to make sure that this funding was being utilized in a way that had the most impact.
Thanks, Chris. I'm going to start to share my screen to just show you a way to navigate to the BCARES application. But Randy or Chris, do you want to talk about kind of the timelines, like how quickly do we need businesses to apply? when does this funding potentially sunset, so people are aware of any time constraints?
Yeah, so that's a great question. All CARES Act funding at this point in time must be spent or expended essentially by the end of the calendar year. So the answer to that question is, in terms of when we want applications, we wanted them yesterday. And I say that because there's a real urgency among our organization to make sure, again, that this funding gets into the hands of small businesses, and we are not leaving any money on the table for the state or the feds to claw back. So as we walk through the application processes and the requirements of the program, really what I want to impose and suggest to this group is get your application in as soon as possible.
Great, thank you. So if you go to the city's website at bakersfieldcity.us, you'll see this COVID-19 response tab in orange. And if you click on that, you can get to the information which is right up top about the city's Be Cares program. And you can navigate to the information about how to apply. And here is the rather, I think, simple online application. Randy, do you just want to walk us through this application real quick?
Absolutely. Yeah, we approach this as trying to make this as simple as possible. So just to kind of give you some basic guidelines, you can see that on the website. But this grant was really focused on micro businesses, those who had under 25 and under employees, $5 million or less in revenues, obviously local businesses in the city limits. And we really tried to make this as simple as possible. The online application process is the preferable approach to this. We do have PDF versions for people to download and fill out and hand in person, but we prefer this online application process. So again, the business needs to be within the city limits. You'll see in the first section there that we need the city business license. So that's one of the requirements of the grant program, is that you have to have a valid city business tax certificate. Again, your address needs to be the business address. One of the things we've seen just in the 400 plus applications we've actually processed is some individual businesses are, for example, we're talking about these mom and pop shops or barbers or beauticians. They're really operating from a location that really isn't theirs. So sometimes they're putting their home address on that application, but we need where they're doing business. So that's one of the primary focuses, and one of the things we look at is if they're doing business within the city limits. So please put that information as to where your shop is located. And then we continue down. If you look at the type of businesses, we just want the name of the business. We don't really have specifications on it. It's got to be for profit. There's another program for not-for-profits. And then the tax identification, the kind of tax returns. You'll see down there that we need 2 years of tax returns. Well, let's just continue that way. First, sorry, Nick, keep scrolling back, go back up. So we're asking the number of employees. Actually, I can't really read that, so I'm going to pull it up myself just to make it easier on my eyes. Hold on one second. So we're asking for if you're a subsidiary of another company, we want to make sure you're actually owned. You're wholly owned and run by the individual applying. We're asking for the number of employees. If you look at the application guidelines, the limitations are between 1 and 25 employees, but the amount of the grant is dependent on your full-time equivalents. So you'll see we ask for whether you have 1 to 5, 6 to 10, 11 to 17, or 18 to 25, and those are the limits of the grant. From 5 to 10 to 15 to $20,000 are the grant limits, and that's based on that full-time equivalent number. We also ask if you are an applicant, if the applicant had received the PPP or Payroll Protection Program funds from the federal government, or if you received the county loan program funds. We're getting a number of applicants that had those, and we'll touch on that later. So we ask for a reference just in case we want to make sure there's a viable business there. And then the next section we want downloaded documents so we can review them. We want the business tax certificate. We want 2 years of tax returns. And for the confirmation and trying to come up with some level of confirmation of number of employees, we want the state DE6 reports. They'll actually enumerate and give you the number of employees. You don't need that if you are actually applying for just the 1 to 5 employees. We don't need the quarterly tax returns, or I'm sorry, quarterly payroll tax returns. We do need the actual federal returns. So please include that. We've had issues, and just kind of touching on some of the issues we've had. People are filling this out on their phone. It's meant to be filled out as easily as possible, but some people are just taking a screenshot, a picture from their phone of the first page of their tax return. We need the full tax return. If you're an individual, your 1040 and your Schedule C showing that you're a business. We have 1120Ss for S Corps, partnerships. So we need that information so we can confirm your expenditure levels, and that you will have sufficient expenditures to really warrant a grant. One of the other problem we're getting, or it's not that often, but we're getting tax returns where the business had less than $5,000 in expenditures the last 2 years. CARES requirements are that you have to spend the money on allowable expenditures. So that includes things like rent, payroll, operating costs. So if we're seeing that you're not generating that level of expenditure, then we will actually deny it unless we get some further information that maybe you've expanded your business or something like that. But that information, the amount of expenditures is what we're really relying on from the tax returns. Let's see, and then we're asking, we're not auditing your business. So there's a number of certifications or acknowledgements that we're having you run through that basically is saying that you qualify for this program. So we are trusting that the applicant is being truthful in all of their acknowledgements. And so please, just be aware that, there are some, if we do get a news report or of someone receiving the funding and they were untruthful in their applications, there could be potential for some sort of pursuit in a civil matter. So we are, again, relying on the truthfulness of the applicant. One of the other things is code violations. Well, that's city code violations. Actually, if there are any violations of that business, that also results in the application being denied. One of the bigger issues that we continue to see is the home occupation permit. A number of individuals have applied that do not have that permit. It's a quick process. I've spoken with our development services staff, and it does not take that long. But if you are showing or putting your residence down as the location of your business, we need to have a home occupation permit, or will again be denied, because that is a code violation. So that's one of the, and we're trying to do our best to really forego the denial by reaching out to applicants when we see it's a resident and we see that they don't have a home occupation permit. We're trying to reach out to them now to really go into the development services department, planning department desk, and get that application done. Once you fill out the application, pay the fee, you leave with the home occupation permit. So there's really no reason to get cause any delays on that end. So that's basically the application process. Really willing to listen to or have any, if people have questions on that, definitely willing to answer them.
Yeah, I think one of the other, obviously the code violations and then the home occupancy permit is something that I think we've heard has been one of the recurring issues where staff is working with people who are applying. Earlier this year, the city very graciously deferred business license deadlines and payments that may have inadvertently caused some people to not maybe have a current business license now. How would someone correct that? And can they do that remotely? Do they have to come into City Hall in order to make sure that they have a current city business license?
Yeah, for the most part, they can do it remotely if they have filed for a business tax certificate before. But if they have not, then you have to come in and get the necessary paperwork into our office. So the renewal process for those who have filed them in the past is an easier process than if it's a brand new business tax certificate. And you do have to come into City Hall North to get that on our first floor.
Thank you very much. And then, one of the things that you mentioned, and I know that's been part of the process with BCares is, trying to see who is applying and if they have already received federal Paycheck Protection Program funds, PPP funds, or the county's Kern Recover Small Business program. Should people who have received that, should they still apply? And is there a point at which these funds will be opened up and made available for applicants that have received one or both of those types of support, programs?
Absolutely, yeah, yes. Actually, if you had received those other funding streams, definitely apply, because based on the volume we're seeing, we're actually creating a two-tier process. We have over almost 500 applications, and over 200 of them are these tier 2 applicants who had received PPP or Kern Recovers funding. We have really put them sort of on the side right now, but based on the volume, there's a portion of those, if not all of them, will be funded. So please continue to encourage those who did receive those funds to apply. There's a good possibility of that all of the tier 2 being funded, but again, it just depends on how many applications come in between the time we trigger the tier 2. I think we're really looking at sometime in November to trigger the tier 2, but we really want to hit those who didn't. I mean, the focus and the primary reason for this was those small mom and pop shops that really were precluded from applying to PPP because it was really based on payroll expenditures. And if you're a sole proprietor, you don't have payroll expenditures. So that's where we were trying to focus this first tier, so to speak. So definitely apply it though if you did receive those funds.
Yeah, and I think, one of the ways that we've been thinking about this is like, for instance, a salon where someone owns the salon, they rent out space to independent contractors, while potentially that salon that may have received PPP or Kern Recovers is in that tier 2 stack. One thing that salon owner might be able to do is encourage their independent contractors, their actual stylists, to apply for Kern Recovers or for BCares. I apologize.
Absolutely. That we're seeing quite a few of those, exactly those types of individuals who are just independent beauticians, barbers, that type of thing, manicurists, and coming in and putting their applications through, and they definitely qualify.
Okay, great, thank you. So I think we have a couple of questions, but before we open it up to just the questions we have in the chat, so if you go, Hillary's put the webpage and the exact address in the chat, but also bakersfieldcity.us, very easy to find. But if somebody has a question, is there a number that they can use to call someone at the city to follow up on their question?
It really depends on the question. I mean, for this specific program, yes, they can call our program manager. It's 852-7001. Her name is Melanie, and she's doing an excellent job, I think, managing all of these various issues that are coming up. This is a new program for us, and I think we've been able to kind of wrangle it and then put it and perfect it as best we can. But she's the first individual to call. If she's unavailable, you can definitely call my number. It's 326-3030. I can answer questions as well.
Okay. I have a couple of specific questions. I think I know the answer to one of them, but so somebody asked, is funding available for new businesses that started during COVID?
Now, that was one of the limitations we set on this to really preclude or try to prevent some level of fraud. We wanted to really apply this to individuals that actually have had a viable business and had seen and have been impacted by COVID. So that was one of the limitations we put. You had to be in business for at least a year starting March 1st, 2019 forward. So that was how we set it up.
Okay. And then if a business, as they're needing to provide, especially the tax documentation, if they've changed their ownership or their status, gone maybe from a corporation to a sole proprietorship, I mean, can they explain that to you as through the application process?
Absolutely, absolutely. Send in your tax return information. You can put in, you can send an email to our bcares@bakersfieldcity.us. Say your application has been sent through, but just explain that difference or that nuance, and we can look at it and be aware of that before we start the review process.
And then an important, really important component to mention, somebody just asked the question, we've seen PPP and Kern recovers, the difference between a forgivable loan and a grant. This is which?
This is a grant. There is no follow-up. Once we see that you applied and you qualify, then that business receives the funding that they qualify for, and there's no second follow-up or any request for funding or return of those funds.
And then how is funding provided? Is it like a paper check? Is it electronically?
No, it is a paper check. Just the complications of putting in a bunch of bank routing numbers and so forth. Just we prefer checks. Our Treasury Department prefers checks. One of the things, again, that individuals should be aware of is if you're putting your salon, so to speak, as your business, we still need you. If you don't want the check mailed to that location, there's a second field for the address, or you can email us if you want that check mailed to your residence. We don't want to get those things mixed up, though. Your residence may not be in the city limits, so we want to make sure that we have your location of where you're operating as a business, and then if we need to get that check mailed to a different location, we have a field there available for that, or you can just email us and get that information to us.
Great. And then what's the processing timeline? So assuming it goes great, I've put in everything, I have all of the PDF documents that need to be uploaded. What's the kind of prototypical processing timeline?
Really, it's we've really perfected it to less than 5 days. It's really almost 3 days, really. If you have all of your documentation in, our program manager is really caught up and is able to really run through them pretty quickly. Again, if you don't have the information, we have a process where you have to remotely, or via the web, a Dropbox, so to speak, of putting it's a secure location for tax return information, that type of thing. So if it's an incomplete application, we have a number of incomplete applications, actually over 60. We've sent information requests to them, but if everything's there, it's three days really.
And Nick, maybe if I could jump in too, to reiterate something Randy said earlier, which is, have that complete application, have all the documents as requested. But again, the preferred route is the online application system, and that will really streamline the time between having your application reviewed and actually having the check cut. The review process, like Randy says, takes about 3 days. Then Randy, I mean, just for the group, I think then it falls kind of in the cycle of when we're cutting checks.
Yep.
So, expect that to be anywhere from a few days to up to a week potentially before.
It just depends on how lucky you are on when we reviewed it. But the review takes about 3 days, usually less, but then our checks are cut on Thursday. So it just depends on where you fell on that review process when the next check.
So Monday or Tuesday, make sure to get your application in so you get in that week's run. There you go. Okay, let me see. Schedule is only a Schedule C needed, or the complete tax return needed?
Well, what we would like is if is the 1040 and the Schedule C, so we see that information rolled up into the front page of that tax return. So, but we don't need all of your Schedule A's, all your other information. If you have passive activities, we don't need any of rental information. It's just the Schedule C that's applicable to the business, and the front 2 pages of the 1040.
Great. And then it's development services. It's the planning department to get that home occupancy certificate.
Yes.
Okay.
And if individuals have questions about, there's a number. I didn't get really deep in the weeds on the different requirements of that. But if you have questions on that, you can call the planning department. If you want me to give that number, I can. That's 326-3679. They're willing to answer the questions of whether you need it. There are a number of limitations that are required once you get that occupancy permit. So
Great, great. I think that is all the questions we have. I just wanted to, first off, thank you all for spending time with us and walking through this program. Secondly, to Chris's point about how you all are using your CARES dollar, you're under no obligation to use these funds to support small businesses. So thank you for doing that. And thank you to the council for approving that. And then I know one thing that we do wanted to hit real quick is there are a couple of other programs that the city is running that people may be interested in as well, including the grant program.
Yeah, Nick, thanks again for the opportunity. So beyond the grant program that we spent most of the time talking about today, I did mention earlier that the city council had allocated some funding, about $2 million, to a nonprofit grant program that actually we partnered with the county of Kern through their nonprofit program that they established to essentially provide similar types of grants to nonprofits within the community. And so I would highly encourage this group, if you're involved with a nonprofit that may be eligible, to just do a quick search for Kern Recovers nonprofit program. The county's webpage will pop up, and we're looking to do kind of, again, a last push to get applications into that program. There's still money available. So if you are a part of a nonprofit, check that out. If you have individuals that you may know or may have tenants that are having trouble due to COVID meeting rental payments, there's also a rental program that both the city and the county are funding that the Housing Authority of Kern is administering. And individuals, this is actually intended to help individuals, and they're the ones that have to apply and show the need, but then the funding, I believe it's up to $5,000 a household, goes directly to the landlord if they're approved. But the individual that is in need would have to dial 211 to get a little bit more information about that program. So again, those are just two other elements of the larger CARES Act umbrella that I wanted to just mention briefly. And again, all that information, you can also find that on the city's website in that same area as the BCARES program as well.
Great. Well, thank you all. And as we said before, we'll be posting this recording to our social media platforms. Please share it with your networks so that we can get as much resources out to our small businesses as possible. So thank you very much, and everyone have a great afternoon.